Welcome, everybody. Nerds Out of Water is a podcast brought to you by two tech professionals and long-term friends, Michael Lobb and myself, David Gamus. Both have worked in various technical careers and have switched to running and owning their own businesses, taking them out of little fish ponds into a sea of sharks. Michael runs TeamScale, whose mission it is to reduce risk in software development projects, allowing visionary founders and talented developers to deliver amazing software on time and on budget.
Thanks, David. And David runs One Bright Cloud, where he has a view towards a future where AI is commonplace and autonomous vehicles provide transportation to your location with the smallest energy footprint. From time to time, we'll be joined by guests ranging from people in business to technologists and every role in between. We challenge our own perspectives and we try to see things from each other's perspective. You don't always need to agree, but after listening to this podcast, you'll definitely have an idea. David, today we're talking to Lucas Ramos, who is in a finance role, and his goal is to take a typical finance or chief finance officer role from being the back of house, number crunching role to being a strategic business partner. He's really passionate about data science and analytics, and he has a startup and innovator mindset. So he crosses over between creative and the data set type of thinking, as well as having expertise in the creation of robotic process automation, and the deployment and scaling of technology. I'm really happy to introduce our next guest, which is Lucas Ramos.
Lucas, welcome.
Thanks, David.
How are you?
I'm really good, mate. Really good. Had a great weekend. It's 2021, ready to kick some goals. Hopefully the world will help this year. Hopefully it'll be slightly different to 2020. So,
yeah, 2020 was a bit of a difficult one for all of us, especially of us in the travel industry, like yourself and myself at different times.
Correct.
So I don't know you. Michael knows you a heap.
Yeah. So, look, I actually left Brazil at the age of 19, and I moved to Australia, straight to the Gold Coast. And I came to uni where I completed my Bachelor of International Business at Griffith Uni. And like most people that moved to this country, and I'm sure, we all know a lot of those people. I absolutely fell in love with the country. And when I completed my bachelor's in international business or in business administration, there really were two options for me to stay in the country. One was to do a master's in IT, or another one in accounting. That was kind of related to business admin. And it's quite ironic that back then I was really not a fan of IT. So accounting was the way to go. So this was I finished uni about 16 years ago. And it's a little ironic because I think, back then, little did I know the importance of an impact of IT in the current business world, in digital transformation, in the industry that I work in, and in my profession. So I guess you can say I'm an accountant by accident, right? That's not to say I don't enjoy, and I didn't enjoy accounting. So I did my master's degree. Later on, I got my qualification as a chartered accountant. It really gave me a lot of clarity as to how much value add an accountant can bring to the organization. So then my very first job was traditional private practice, doing your traditional tax returns, financial statements. And it really made me question whether accounting was right for me. Mind you, back then, accounting was really a proper number crunching job. You have manual bank statements, you have paper receipts, you had to collate all of that data, enter the data, and try to make some sense of it. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't wait to get out of public practice and move into an organization what in accounting was always called commerce. So you have private practices and commerce. And I was lucky to join after 3 years the Mentor Group. which you guys may know or used to know was the largest accommodation provider in Australia and New Zealand. And 3 years ago, they were purchased by Accor. And so I spent 9 years there, and I rose from accountant to senior accountant to finance manager and area financial controller while I was there. And I moved a little bit away from corporate accounting in my first years at Mentra into operations. And that's where I discovered my passion. As soon as I started partnering with general managers, with with departmental managers, using analytical and financial modeling skills, translating operations into numbers into operations, I realized that I really loved being part of that strategic part of the businesses. And then 3 years ago, I joined DAE, which now has been renamed and rebranded to Seven Across. I worked closely with Michael, I think my first couple of years there. And I was brought in right after the acquisition from Wyndham Destinations and RCI to support the integration of the business globally and lead the financial planning and analysis function. So that's pretty much my last 18 years in this country, which will be in 2 weeks. 18 years in Australia.
2 weeks.
Yes.
18
celebration
years
time.
2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah, it's always celebration time in my eyes. So another reason to celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah, just find a new excuse. With the analytics that you were talking about, you've spent a lot of effort and time, and your passion, I guess, is showing where you can deliver on delivering those analytics and producing operational goals and hitting those. How do you use that to help a business grow?
Well, look, let me give you a little bit of background as to how I got into analytics, because I think it will help answer this question. So, as I mentioned, when I was at Mentra, I moved into operations. And I discovered that there was a significant gap and a need from those stakeholders to gain value from deep financial analysis and complex financial models. When you talk about what-if scenarios, forecasting and budgeting, and I've always been someone that I loved a challenge, and I continually challenge myself, to know more and learn more. So during the time, I started exploring our business intelligence tool back then to harness a lot more data, and I started exploring a variety of courses online on the subject matter. Now, I think around then, 5-6 years ago, was when there was an explosion of courses online. There was Lynda back then that became LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Udemy, those university courses. They started being freely available. Then subsequently, they started charging for quite a few of those. And that's when I got to learn about the terms business analytics and data science. And I started exploring a lot more, and I started taking some business analytics courses and data science courses. And that's when I learned I go, oh, wow, this is not only is really aligned to who I am and what I'm doing at work, it's something really exciting. It's evolving really fast, and you can genuinely add a lot of value to the businesses when you gain a lot more expertise in this area. So that's what I started doing. I think, first of all, I started studying a lot. I started getting a lot more expertise. I started adding more value to the businesses. And then the businesses started, appreciating all that. And as you know, there's always that deep satisfaction when you're able to provide information that wasn't previously available to the business, and they really like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle, right? So the ability, I guess, over the last few years for me to harness a lot of data and identify new patterns and relationships in the data to support or deny, I guess, the goals and the objectives of the business, for me have been, they are absolutely fantastic. They are so insightful for the business, and I think the business really appreciates our ability. I think until recently, most businesses have been just driving on gut feel, on personal experience. I've always done this, I've always done that. But with the advance of data and analytics, data has been able to disprove a lot of those strategies and those ways to manage business. And I think this is where the beauty of data and analytics is, and then the value that it can bring to the businesses.
I mean, there's the old saying of if you always do what you always do, then you'll always get what you've always got. And I think that one thing, where you can get with data analytics is you can get a lot of facts that support or, like you said, disprove some of the theories that you have done over the last 10, 20 years, and then you end up with a new paradigm where you can actually move out into branching into some new ways of doing things, which I think is good.
Couldn't agree more, Michael. Yeah, I think it's exactly that.
I've done a lot of work with machine learning, specifically with autonomous vehicles. So LiDAR, detection of shapes and objects, that sort of thing. I've also done it in fraud control. Have you really used your decision making through machine learning or AI, or your passion for that deep data? Have you used it to make decisions?
That's where I would like to, David. So I think the big challenge with machine learning, when you read about machine learning, and you've obviously have experience with it, is the next frontier of data and analytics. But it's a very sophisticated amount of analytics. And I know there's a lot of hype around machine learning, and I think once you navigate through that hype and you try to identify what's the true value that it can bring to the business, you really need to understand how to successfully implement machine learning. And to successfully implement machine learning, it takes probably about, look, I say in most organizations, it's probably going to take you a good 2 to 3 to 5 years of a digital transformation journey to create the necessary environment to then support machine learning. Let me give my personal example at Seven Across. We had to create almost from scratch a proper analytical environment, ensuring that we created the right data pipelines, it started bringing all the data into one integrated location, started defining all the data, creating that single source of truth, to then start harnessing and exploring the data from a descriptive analytics point of view. And descriptive analytics is the very first stage of analytics. You've got descriptive, then you move over to predictive and prescriptive. And to arrive at a robust descriptive analytics environment in which you really have a true understanding of everything that your data is showing and the why and what's happened and why it's happened. Again, it takes a fair bit of time for you to move over to a predictive model, which is usually driven by machine learning. You need to use a lot of that historical data. So you need to have understanding of all the historical data. Is it clean? Is it accurate? Have we got the quality and the quantity of data necessary to fit into this machine learning model?
That's awesome. I have noticed that a number of businesses, especially large businesses, rely on the data that they already receive to feed into their pipeline. And they don't look at what you've just said about it being accurate, a single truth, and it be the central truth where it isn't manipulated. A lot of people get halfway down this journey and realize that the data they're using is already being manipulated, so it's already incorrect.
Yeah, I'll add a couple more things to that. I think I am half analytical and half visionary. And by that, I mean, I'm always trying to think where the business really should be in the next 3 to 5 years. Those big dream, a big picture kind of guys. But at the same time, I'm super analytical, which means my mind is at direct conflict with that vision. And I'm trying to utilize facts, results, data to support or deny that vision. So when I come up with, I go, okay, hey, in 3 to 5 years, we want to have 3 or 4 solutions that will be driven by machine learning because, predictive forecasting, a recommendation engine, an intelligent chatbot, etc. But in order to arrive at that, what are the common pitfalls that organizations have when introducing machine learning? What are the learnings that we can have from all the larger and medium-sized organizations that have just followed the hype of machine learning, thinking that machine learning is a one solution fits all and it's going to solve all the world's problems, and they go straight into the machine learning model without understanding all the steps they need to take to successfully introduce that model. So that's why I think I have educated myself a lot in the subject matter. I've done a number of courses last year, and I'm trying to take the prudent steps and approaches to enable that successful implementation of machine learning model, because it is a large effort. It's going to take a lot of time from a lot of people, which means it's a big investment from an organization. And if you're leading that project, you don't want to fail. So
No. It was interesting. At the end of last year, I got asked, can you just implement Industry 4.0 and put it on a dashboard for me?
Exactly. And the answer is yes. Just give me 3 to 5 years.
No. I think they wanted it in 3 to 4 weeks.
The answer is always yes, with enough time and money.
Exactly.
Yep.
With 2020 being the way it has, and I know that you're in the travel industry. We all have links to the travel industry in places. What are some of the strategies that you've used to keep the business sustainable?
Well, this is a very interesting question. 2020 in the travel industry, I think tough is an understatement. I think there's a couple of main things that I did throughout 2020. First, especially in the early times, in the early days of the pandemic, was to structure the team in a way that we could be pretty much ready for that crisis management mode. So that means, people, data, financial model, resources for short-term decision making had to take priority over other projects and tasks. And let's get together. Let's sit and walk through everything that we had planned to do. Let's just scrape most of that. And our priority now is we are available for that crisis management. And aligned to that, but more from a leadership point of view, is I really tried to be, even though at times it was very difficult, the best leader that I could. We went through very uncertain times, especially the first 3 months in the organization. Globally, there were people that were impacted in the travel industry in general, as we know, we would have heard in the news. So maintaining positivity during the uncertain times. We all hear about the lead by example motto. And I think this was very true in 2020. You need to ensure that you have empathy towards all those people that you work with, that you be a good listener, that you support, that you mentor, that you maintain a positive attitude towards the work, jobs, the industry in general. Because at the end of the day, you didn't have a crystal ball. You didn't know what was going to happen. So all you could do is try to maintain that positive approach to ensure that we're all engaged, not just the people that I work with, but myself. I couldn't let myself get into that negative mindset that everything's so uncertain, everyone's going to lose their jobs and what's going to happen in my life, because you really didn't know. You didn't know what was going to happen. So, I think we really needed to embrace those values. In the end, unless you have an engaged and positive workforce, you can't reach any of the short, mid, or long-term goals. And we had so many short-term decision-making goals throughout 2020, probably, especially in the world of finance and analytics, was probably the busiest time of most people's lives. It's definitely the most challenging and busiest times that I went through in the last 18 years. And talking to people who have been in the industry for 30, 40 years, they said the exact same thing.
It's been the same in technology as well. Lots of short-term decisions to get us through this year. And then, with hopefully understanding what the longer-term goals are so that we can switch things into a different gear when this is all over. Given I know that you've spent a lot of time overseas working, and you've been involved with the transition of DAE through to Wyndham, as well as prior to that, you spent a lot of time in Asia. How do you find the work style? Because I know that you work really hard, and I think that there's a lot of similarities in some places. So how do you find the work style across borders?
Look, I've been to Singapore a few times for work, while working at Seven Across, and I work very closely with the team over there. I think prior to that, personally, I've been studying Mandarin Chinese for the last 8 years. As I told you guys, I love a challenge, and I don't know why I ever gave myself that challenge, because that's by far way harder than learning data science and machine learning. But so I think I already had some understanding of what we see in general Asian culture is like. But I really think that, look, there are some general differences in both cultures. I think that from a work point of view, Asian culture seems to uphold the concept of the organizational hierarchy and those senior to them very strongly, and I think with a lot of respect. Whereas I think in the West, we tend to see organizational hierarchy. Yeah, they exist, but more from a flatter organizational hierarchy. Um, but I really think that in the end, we're all individuals. And I say that, I think there's always certain similarities that we can all bond on, be it food or music or sports or studying a language. I think if you find those similarities with individuals, regardless of where they're from, you're able to create a really quick bond, and then you establish that closer relationship, and you're able to just open up more and have a joke and have a better connection in general with those individuals. So I don't think I don't think I ever had to adapt my work style, Michael, because again, in general, I think people may see, Asia and Australia work very differently, but you may think that the dynamics may perceive a little differently, but once you get to know individuals, it's no different than knowing, your next door neighbor or your cousin or your friend back home. We're all individuals. So,
and you would know this. I mean, Australia is so multicultural that you're finding most of these cultures exist within your neighborhood or your workplace or anything like that anyway. So
exactly.
You've spoken about traveling and being in Asia and Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
How has that affected your work-life balance, and how do you cope with that and manage that?
Look, I think prior to the pandemic, managing work-life balance, because the world has changed so much when we look at work. So prior to the pandemic, managing work-life balance probably took a very different approach to what post-2020 or post-pandemic, should we say, is. Traveling is difficult. It's difficult in the body. Absolutely is. You're jet lagged. You have to wake up and just perform and go into meetings, and you have poor sleep for 5 days that you're there, and then upon your return, you have to catch up with everything that was outstanding. But I think one thing that I found post pandemic was to first I need to ensure that I have focus. I should never try to multitask. And why I say that is the moment that I'm able to focus and multitask, it means I can actually tick through a lot of the tasks and projects a lot easier and successfully. By focusing on one thing at a time, I don't get overwhelmed, so I'm removing that stressor from my life. And I think that in itself, it's important from a work-life balance, is to really remove the stresses. I used to get really overwhelmed with everything that I had to do, whereas, over the last few years, I learned to allow myself to understand, look, it's okay to have all these projects and tasks, and you will be able to complete them. Just focus on them one at a time. But then it's just also understanding that there will be certain weeks that I would be stretched out, and then give myself the ability to try to take a little bit lighter the following week. And similarly, the same thing with people that I work with. But that was prior pandemic. We used to go to an office 5 days a week. We used to work pretty much fixed hours, or we used to be expected to work fixed hours. Post-pandemic, everything's changed, right? Now we're all sitting behind a computer. We're all sometimes getting on our emails at 6 a.m. or at 10 p.m., whatever suits better. And I think that what 2020, what pandemic did to work-life balance, or what it did to the work in general, is enabled us as professionals to look at work as, delivery-based performance, not hours worked-based performance. And I think in the end of the day, we hire professionals to ensure that they have certain skill sets and they deliver specific tasks and projects that are aligned to companies' goals and objectives. So it makes no sense for us to be looking at the work as, hey, you need to complete your 38 hours a week. You actually need to complete your tasks and your projects and ensure that you're successful. They're aligned to goals and objectives. So how I have seen post-pandemic, and I really try to, I guess, embrace these values, is if in some weeks it may take you 10 hours a day, or some days may take you 10 hours a day to complete certain things, but the next day may take you only 2, then go for it. If you prefer to take the day off because you've got kids and really jump onto your PC at 4 p.m. and work through the night, then go for it. I think as long as we have the right amount of communication, there are a number of stakeholders that depend on what you're doing. You work as part of a team, you have someone that you report to or someone that report into you. Just make sure that communication is key and critical, but there is no reason for us to be expecting anyone to be working, 15-hour days just for the sake of it. So I think this is where work-life balance, has become quite a big thing post-pandemic. I think embracing these values automatically gives people that balance that they need in their work life and personal life.
Yeah, I think a value-based job is always a lot more satisfying as well, because you can see the output from it. You know that you're delivering something of value, so that you can see what value that's bringing to the business. So it's always a lot more satisfying at the end of that.
Absolutely.
And going on multitasking, I think we need to think of some ladies and females who would say all men should only look at one task at a time.
And they're right. I cannot multitask. Sometimes I'm actually on the phone or on a video, on a Zoom call, and we're talking through a subject, and in the meantime I'm trying to locate an email about something that we've discussed, and usually within 10 seconds I have to tell the individual, said, I'm really sorry, I need to stop talking to you, otherwise I cannot focus and find this email. I don't know if it's a stereotype, but I definitely follow that stereotype.
No comment.
What technology has changed for you over the last 18 years that you've been in working in your working life? I mean, it's changed dramatically for everyone, but specifically in your industry, what do you think has changed to make it better or worse?
Look, there's been so many, technology that has actually changed. But I think probably, I think if I look back 15 years ago, larger organizations already had an ERP system. And I think, but back then the ERP system meant that you had disparate reports in predefined formats that you could generate from those reports. But you really never had a way to integrate all the data. And working in the finance world, what you had to do is just pull predefined reports, a lot of the time print them out to analyze the reports, and then populate a lot of the data into additional models to create your what if scenarios and your forecasting and your budgeting. Again, before we mentioned about the single source of truth, was it a single source of truth? Well, it was the source of truth from the ERP. And the ERP was actually pulling data from potentially another reservation system, and at times populated in by a person. So there was already, a lot of data integrity issues. Subsequent to that, you pull those reports, and a lot of times you manually input data into another Excel spreadsheet with your own way to define that data, not a corporate governance, a data governance framework. Now, that was until the introduction of business intelligence tools, right? And I think that's probably what's changed the most, especially in my world of finance. And I know that I'm a lot more into analytics, but around the world of finance was the introduction of business intelligence tools that really enable organizations to start thinking about truly integrating all of their data into one location, ingesting the data from all various sources into one single analytical environment, and then utilize the business intelligence tool to harness the data and to create reports. So business intelligence tools enable us to automate a lot of the data input, and spend a lot more time in actually extracting data that has already been defined, that is accurate for strategic decision making in the business, right? It enables you to be quicker with your what if scenarios, with your forecasts, with your budgeting. There's a term floating around in FP&A, which is financial planning and analysis, which is all about agile financial planning and analysis. And until a few years ago, in many organizations, professionals in FP&A still spend a lot of time crunching numbers and collating data. But Agile is all about that automation and integration of centrally defined data, and enables professionals to actually extract the data in an agile manner, and every week, every 2 weeks, reforecast, rebudget, dice and dissect the data specifically for marketing or for operations or for sales, and utilize their analytical skills to really partner with the organization. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes. And I really can't wait for the next 10 to 15 years, because I can just imagine what automation and the augmented intelligence, I should say, that we'll have as a result of AI attached to many of these applications and tools will enable us to do as professionals.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a favorite set of tools?
Look, my favorite tool and application, something I've been working, and a lot of organizations have it. It may sound probably a bit cliche, should I say, but Power BI is, between Power BI and Tableau, they're two of the largest business intelligence tools. I think the power of Power BI is incredible, and it keeps growing on the daily. It's not just a visualization tool. I think the visualization capabilities of Power BI are second to none. But the ability to integrate data sources in an automated basis, the amount of connections and connectors out there are growing every day. So it really enables you to connect data sources from all sorts of business applications. Then once you connect the data, how powerful that tool is to transform that data, to create the relationships in the data, to mash up data sets in a very quick, easy to use way, to create the KPIs and the metrics that your business needs to understand performance. I absolutely love it. I'm a massive fan of Power BI.
Yeah, I have to say, about 6 or 7 years ago when I was using Power BI, even back then it was a really incredible tool for pulling those data in, to manipulate them, to be able to put them into a simplified dashboard.
Yeah, back then was still part of Excel, wasn't it? Or it was just,
It was just changing over when I saw it, when I got it online.
Yeah, so.
Lucas, we have 3 questions that we ask everyone we're talking to, and it's as we come to the end of the podcast. What would you do differently if you had the chance to do it differently?
I would have probably tried to learn all about IT, and at least the concept of how computers work, hardware, software, information systems, databases, much earlier in the piece. When I was at uni, a 19-year-old, and I was not a fan of IT. I wasn't one of those geeks that grew up coding or anything like that. I was a geek in my own way. I liked maths and I liked science. And I love geography, but I was never a big fan of IT. And I still remember at uni learning information systems, the one subject in information systems, and I did really poorly because I remember thinking, when am I ever going to use this? How ironic, right? So, so over the last 5 to 6 years, that's where it really hit me in the head. They go, oh wow, like I am so far behind my knowledge of IT in general, of data structures and data schemas and information systems and connection and network, etc. And all of that is absolutely critical for a finance professional these days, especially because finance is morphing into sophisticated analytics, and sophisticated analytics is driven by very sophisticated softwares. And databases and cloud applications. So it's really important to have that knowledge. So it's obviously taken me a little time, and it's been a big learning curve for me, especially in the first 2 or 3 years, learning these things. Now I'm finally at a stage that I feel pretty comfortable, I think, with my knowledge, at least for the realm of data science. Should I say the realm of data science is very broad. As you start going to sophisticated machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, it's not quite there yet. But at least from an analytics point of view, coding or languages like R and Python and SQL, at least I've learned the basics of those to be able to manipulate and query some data sets. So that's probably what I would have done differently. Is try to be a little bit more enthusiastic about IT back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, when I was at uni, I got actually told not to waste my time on computers, remembering the whole unit, we only had 6 computers, and I had to learn slide rules. And that was during my engineering degree.
Well, back then as well, there was a big disillusion with IT because it wasn't long until we had a massive crash in the NASDAQ in North America, because we had a big tech boom and IT boom, and then it came crashing down. So I think a lot of professionals were a bit disillusioned with that world and thought maybe this is not the future. And look where we are now, It's all about technology. So
maybe I'm talking a few years before that, but we won't go there. So if you looking at what your idea was, if you would be doing something differently, but if you weren't doing exactly what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I'd be doing something completely different. And by that, I mean, it may sound funny, but I love travel, right? I'm a massive traveler, and I'm probably one of those people, I just want to travel the world. But how can you do that for a living? I actually follow a number of YouTube channels, and they're travel vloggers. And some of them have over 1 million subscribers, and they make a really good living out of that. If you ever Google how much people make with over 1 million subscribers, there's some very hefty figures in there. And I watch these videos, and I don't want to sound full of it, but I do think that half the time I could do just as good of a job.
Yeah.
If I was a little bit younger, if I could just, quit everything and travel the world. So that's probably what I would be doing. As long as we weren't facing a world pandemic, right, that completely stopped international travel. So,
well, but you see the bloggers who are making the money, what they're doing is they're going local.
They're going local, exactly. Or if they're from the US, despite COVID situation over there, they can still fly into a few countries like Egypt, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico. Yeah, so that's what I'd probably be doing.
I'd follow that. There you go. You got two followers. Do you have any? You touched on this before, but do you have any predictions for the future of your industry, specifically around technology?
Yeah. So again, I told you guys before, I'm always trying to think of the next few years of organizations, and I do read a bit about the future of finance, accounting, analytics. But if I focus on finance and accounting, because that's my background, I think the future of the industry itself is the departments of finance and accounting will probably be a lot smaller. Traditional accounting, which is your number crunching that I did my first 10 years, that will be pretty much fully automated in the next few years. So we're not far from that because many organizations have already fully automated the accounting close process, the AP, accounts payable, accounts receivables. But that still means that some of those professionals need to shift and upskill themselves because they still need to manage the automation component of their department. It's also, finance and accounting is also shifting a lot into that strategic partnership as a result of automation and intelligence, business intelligence. And as I mentioned earlier, that we're going to have augmented intelligence, right, in the near future, working with tools, applications, bots, all sorts of things. So it really will enable us as individuals to elevate the amount of insights that we can provide an organization with the augmented intelligence. So if I think specifically of technologies that will impact the finance industry, I think first one that we're already seeing a lot is RPA, or robotic process automation. And that's really automating the full end-to-end processes within finance. And if you read anything about RPA until 2 years ago used to really just be automation of those manual driven tasks, but now a lot of the RPA tools, they have machine learning built into them, and they actually follow what you do on the computer, and they can create recommendations as what the application believes can be automated. So RPA will support that true integration of the digital workplace, should I say. Next one is machine learning. Now that's an obvious one. Machine learning has predictive and prescriptive capabilities, and finance will all be about prediction, right? Gone are the days that finance just looks at past and history. Now, we've got some of the past data, but just feed that into a machine learning model with related data, and let's try to understand what's going to be the best outcome, the optimal level of resources, what's the estimated sales and estimated demand, and all that sort of thing. So that predictive forecasting, predictive budgeting is probably the next stage of FP&A. And last one is blockchain. Blockchain is something I don't know a lot. Like, I haven't done any courses specifically on blockchain. I've learned a lot of articles on what blockchain is, and it's really disrupting the finance industry. I think that it's very up and coming because of the secured and distributed ledger nature without a single central controlling entity. So a lot of organizations are hiring blockchain experts to design applications for processing payments and funds transfer, for loyalty rewards, to monitor supply chains, to share data. And that in itself is very, very secure compared to existing applications out there. So I think probably those three pieces of technology will impact the most.
Interesting. Yeah, the blockchain stuff has got a huge impact in a few industries, I think, and especially finance and health as well, I think. Yeah. Lucas, it's been wonderful to have you on the show, and thanks for sharing all of that information with us. It's like all of this information came out of your head, and now I've got to process it. So.
No, thanks so much for having me, guys.
It's really nice to hear someone who's as passionate about AI and blockchain as I am, because I come on here and Michael starts shaking his head. Here we go again.
Oh, no.
So, Lucas, thank you very much for that.
What's that? Do you continue saving your password in an Excel spreadsheet? Well, my friend, either your habits need to be changed or you are going to be exposed to a cyber attack very soon. At TeamScale, we have decades of experience assisting our customers in securing their business and optimizing their process, making them more competitive in the market. Be bold, be smarter, be faster with TeamScale. Visit teamscale.com to learn more.